So what if I told you that telling someone, you did so well today, might actually be praising them for injuring themselves?
Yeah, which sounds completely backwards, doesn't it? I mean, validation, praise.
Right. Telling someone they seem totally fine in a stressful situation. We universally think of these as good things.
Oh, absolutely. We treat them as the ultimate markers of success, right?
Yeah,
Like resilience.
exactly. But what if those exact compliments are actually symptoms of a hidden ongoing injury?
It really forces you to completely reevaluate almost every interaction you have in, well, in a professional or educational setting. You start to realize that our highest praise might be fundamentally misplaced.
I want you, listening right now, to think about phrases you've probably used or maybe had said to you. Things like, I never would have known you were struggling.
Yeah, or you handled that meeting perfectly, you seemed completely fine.
Right. And on the surface, that sounds like a glowing review.
Yeah.
But today, we are taking a deep dive into an entirely different perspective. I'm your host, and with our resident expert today, we are pulling from this incredibly eye-opening article.
It really is. It's by Dr. Jaime Hoerricks.
And for those taking notes, her first name is pronounced J-A-M-E. The piece is titled The First Autistic Person. The first autistic person to pass as fine and not pay for it later.
It is just such a profound piece of writing. Like, Dr. Hoerricks focuses specifically on the autistic experience, but in doing so, she holds up a very uncomfortable mirror to how society at large operates, you know?
Yeah, she is basically challenging the absolute bedrock metrics we use to define what a healthy, functioning environment even looks like.
Precisely.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to fundamentally dismantle and reconstruct how you understand concepts like participation and accessibility.
We're going to shine a massive spotlight on the hidden labor that people perform just to exist in public spaces.
Spaces that most of us just, move through without a second thought. Okay, let's unpack this because Dr. Hoerricks starts by tearing down a concept we thought we understood, which is passing.
Right. When society talks about an autistic person passing, it's almost universally framed as social camouflage.
Like learning the right conversational scripts.
Exactly. We tend to think of it as forcing eye contact even when it feels totally unnatural, or figuring out the specific timing of a joke.
Just projecting this elaborate performance of ease in a world built on neurotypical norms.
Right, and while that social masking is incredibly real and exhausting, Dr. Hoerricks argues that it is far too small of a definition. She redefines passing not just as social labor, but as intense, grueling sensory labor.
Sensory labor, wow. So we're talking about something far deeper than just pretending to be socially typical.
Much deeper. It is pretending that a room isn't physically costing you what it is actually costing you.
To understand this, I guess we have to look at the mechanics of why a room costs anything at all, right?
Yeah, well, in a neurotypical brain, there's a mechanism called sensory habituation.
Right, habituation.
So if you walk into an office and the air conditioner is humming, you hear it for about 2 minutes, and then your brain it filters it out.
It deems the sound unimportant, so it drops it from your conscious awareness.
Exactly. The brain basically says, we get it, AC is on, let's focus on the spreadsheet.
But for an autistic person experiencing sensory differences or, sensory overload, that habituation often doesn't happen.
It doesn't. The inputs just don't fade into the background. They stay at maximum volume, or they actually amplify over time.
So passing is the physical act of keeping your face perfectly still under blinding fluorescent lights.
Yeah, lights that your brain is processing as a constant, aggressive strobe light.
Wow. And it's the act of staying seated in a chair with like a scratchy fabric that feels actively painful against your skin.
Or answering your manager's question casually while the sound of that air conditioner is multiplying in your ears like a jet engine.
She calls this the hidden arithmetic, right? She describes it as counting without numbers.
Yeah, and when you look at the sheer volume of data being calculated in this arithmetic, it is staggering. I mean, you're tracking how bright the lights are, how loud the room is getting.
Exactly how far you are from the nearest exit.
Right. You are calculating how much speech you have, quote, left in the drawer, how much of a lingering smell is in the room.
Like someone's reheated lunch or something.
Yeah, and how much touch from your own clothing you can tolerate before you physically break.
And remember, you are doing all of this manual processing while simultaneously nodding at a PowerPoint presentation.
You're actively negotiating with every single nervous system response in your body, suppressing the natural flinch just to stay in the room and appear professional.
It sounds like a smartphone running a dozen massive background apps at the exact same time.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
When you look at the screen, it looks completely normal to the user. Maybe it's just showing a simple text message. But inside, the processor is overheating, the internal fan is screaming, and the battery is in absolute freefall.
Yeah, you can't see the drain, but the device is seconds away from a critical shutdown.
But if they're doing all this intense mental math, why does it just look like coping to everyone else? I mean, how can a biological system be that close to crashing without anyone in the room noticing?
What's fascinating here is that the external markers of success are fundamentally designed to mask the internal reality.
What do you mean by that?
Well, society has a very simple binary checklist for participation. Did the person stay in the room? Yes. Did they answer when spoken to? Yes. Did they sit still? Yes.
So we measure presence, not the cost of that presence.
Exactly. The human face, the human voice, a rigid posture, these can all be forced to perform these tasks even when the internal system is in a state of absolute crisis.
Because a competent adult can sit in a meeting and appear completely available simply because they've learned how to suppress their natural physical responses to pain.
Often through a lifetime of negative reinforcement, yeah. They are performing access inside a place that hasn't actually given it to them.
And because that internal processor is hidden, and all we see on the outside is a calm screen, we draw a very dangerous conclusion.
We assume that because the person looks fine, the environment must be fine.
Right. And society doesn't just passively accept this performance, it actively weaponizes that very success against the autistic person.
Yes. Dr. Hoerricks calls this the trap of competence.
A trap of competence. Okay, break that down for us.
It's a devastating paradox. It essentially means that the better an autistic person passes, the less they are believed when they actually ask for help or accommodation.
Because we mistake their sheer survival for genuine access.
Exactly.
This part of the source material was just completely paradigm shifting for me. She writes about how the performance itself is used as concrete evidence against the person's needs.
People will say, see, you managed. You taught the class. You can do it when you try.
Right. You don't really need the lighting adjusted because, look, you were fine yesterday.
The entire logic of the institution, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about a corporate workplace, a university, or even a chaotic family Thanksgiving, it's based entirely on external endurance.
So if an autistic teacher manages to get through teaching a class without a visible breakdown, the administration declares the classroom accessible.
Yep. Doing normal behaviors like sitting still, ignoring a uniform that triggers a sensory nightmare, or eating whatever food happens to be available, it's treated as airtight proof that these acts are not costly to the individual.
Wait, so success is actually penalized?
Effectively, yes.
It's like being put on trial, where your own ability to survive a hostile environment is the primary evidence used to deny you a life raft,
That's a brutal way to put it, but it's completely accurate.
You're drowning, but because you're treading water so frantically that your head stays above the surface, they point at you and say, well, they aren't sinking, so they obviously don't need a boat.
The competent adult becomes unbelievable to the institution because she's already learned how to survive the very conditions that harm her. Her survival is turned into the argument against her access needs.
Wow.
The institution looks at its own data and says, she looked fine yesterday, therefore she was fine. She did it last time, therefore she can do it this time.
It completely ignores the compound interest of that survival.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? How does this change the way we define what an accessible space even is?
Yeah.
Because if the person in the room is quietly running that hidden arithmetic, burning out their battery just to appear fine to their manager, then the space isn't actually accessible at all.
Right. It means we have to stop measuring accessibility purely at the door. I mean, we measure physical accessibility by asking if a wheelchair can get into the room, which is obviously crucial.
Or her.
But we measure sensory and systemic accessibility merely by whether a person stayed in the room. And as Dr. Hoerricks points out, sensory cost is not settled in the moment. It is delayed.
Right. If all that energy is being spent holding the system together during the meeting, that physical toll has to go somewhere once the meeting ends. It can't just evaporate.
No, it definitely doesn't evaporate.
Which brings us to the concept of the delayed invoice and what she calls the after room.
Think of it like a predatory loan. The institution, the office, or the school gets the immediate payout of a normal, productive meeting. They get exactly what they want in that hour.
But the autistic person took out a massive physiological loan to fund that performance.
Yes, and they are stuck paying a 500% interest rate in physical pain 12 hours later.
Because the body keeps the books, even when the institutions do not.
The institution thinks the transaction is over when the Zoom call ends. But the actual cost of the meeting, the collapse, it doesn't happen in the boardroom.
It happens in the car on the drive home. It happens in the shower. It happens in the bedroom the next morning.
Dr. Hoerricks' description of this afterroom, the space where that predatory loan finally comes due, is incredibly vivid.
Yeah, the invoice arrives, and suddenly, the person who was perfectly articulate and leading a presentation 3 hours ago is barely vocal.
They have no spoons left, meaning zero energetic capacity.
She describes having a head full of weather, where a small sound, like a spoon dropping, is suddenly too sharp.
Or a simple question from a spouse feels far too massive to even process, let alone answer.
Right, there's a delayed hunger that only arrives after the pressure to speak has finally vanished.
Or a deep sense of grief without any public event to justify it to the outside world. It can even manifest as what she calls body weather.
Body weather, like a small tightening.
Yeah, just a sudden narrowing of patience. And the person often loses their executive function entirely during this time in the afterroom.
Let's pause on that term for a second for someone who isn't familiar. By executive function, you mean the brain's basic management system, right?
Exactly.
The ability to plan, focus, or even initiate a simple physical task like making a sandwich or changing clothes.
Exactly that. The bridge between knowing you need to take off your work shoes and actually sending the signal to your hands to untie the laces, it just collapses completely.
Wow.
And this is where the massive disconnect happens. Because the invoice arrives when the person is completely alone or only with their closest family members at home, the rest of the world never sees the cost of their earlier demands.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone listening right now, maybe a manager or a teacher.
Okay.
And they might be thinking, hold on, everyone is exhausted after back-to-back meetings. Everybody is burnt out by 5 p.m. on a Tuesday. It's called having a job.
Sure, that's a common reaction.
So how do we make it clear to the listener that this isn't just typical Tuesday afternoon fatigue, but a cumulative, disproportionate collapse?
Well, typical fatigue is a proportional response to energy expended. You run a marathon, your muscles are tired, you do a lot of difficult financial modeling, your brain is tired.
Right, that makes sense.
But the delayed invoice of sensory passing is not just fatigue. It is an active state of injury and neurological shutdown. It is a debt that alters your physiology.
So a neurotypical person might need to put their feet up and watch TV after a stressful meeting.
Yeah, but an autistic person who has been heavily masking might lose the ability to speak for 2 days. They might suffer severely disrupted sleep, experience intense physical pain from sensory overload, or develop chronic autoimmune responses over time.
The scale of the collapse is entirely different.
Completely different. But because it happens offstage, behind closed doors, people call it a disproportionate reaction to whatever minor thing finally tipped the scale at home.
So when the person finally breaks because someone dropped a pen on the kitchen floor at 7 p.m., the observer says, "Why are you overreacting to a dropped pen?"
Exactly. But it's not the pen. The pen is just the final grain of sand. The reaction is the cumulative weight of the fluorescent lights, the sounds, the scratching chair, and the forced smiles from 8 hours ago.
If we connect this... Wait, actually, if I can jump in.
Oh, go ahead.
It just feels like this is perfectly designed to let the workplace off the hook.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this delayed timeline is exactly how the system protects itself from accountability.
Yes.
Because the bill arrives away from the scene of the injury, the scene is instantly acquitted, the boardroom doesn't see the body shaking at home.
The school doesn't see the student completely shut down on the living room floor, unable to eat dinner.
The system just looks at its own ledger, sees perfect attendance, and calls it a resounding success.
Which leads us directly into the massive, real-world danger of institutional innocence.
Yeah, that's a huge part of this.
If institutions rely on flawed data like, if they assume quiet survival means a space is accessible, they end up creating environments that are actively hostile while pretending their hands are completely clean.
Right. The environment remains innocent while the harm is entirely individualized onto the person suffering.
The institution gets to wash its hands and say, well, the room is fine, everyone else is fine, so the problem must be you.
And we see this play out everywhere with devastating consequences. Take the education system, for example.
Okay.
A student who holds it together perfectly all day at school, uses every ounce of their capacity to pass academically and survive the sensory nightmare of the cafeteria and the echoing hallways.
And then absolutely melts down the second they walk through their front door.
Exactly. The school looks at the parents, bewildered, and says, well, they're a perfect angel at school, so it must be a problem with your parenting at home.
The institution is acquitted.
We see the exact same dynamic in the professional world, too. An autistic adult realizes they're paying too high a price, taking out too many predatory physiological loans, so they finally advocate for themselves.
Like they ask for written instructions instead of verbal ones.
Yeah, or they ask to have the fluorescent lighting above their desk adjusted.
And how is that usually received? They are viewed as difficult or particular or not a team player.
It becomes a human resources annoyance rather than a legitimate access need.
Which is so frustrating. Because if they try to explain that the current setup causes a delayed cost, that it impacts their ability to function after hours, the institution just dismisses it.
The institution treats that later cost as a private medical or emotional issue that is completely unrelated to the workplace. The culture we live in calls endurance maturity, and it calls masking professionalism.
Why should you care about this? I mean, to you listening right now, because whether you are a manager shaping a company culture, a teacher looking at a quiet classroom, a parent trying to understand your child, or just a friend, our entire metric for evaluating a healthy environment is fundamentally broken if quiet survival is our only benchmark.
Absolutely.
If we're judging the success of a space by how well people hide their pain while inside it, we are failing. We are just creating factories for burnout. So how do we start praising people for being injured quietly?
This raises an important question, and it is really the crux of Dr. Hoerricks' argument. We have to change our core philosophy around what it means to participate.
Okay.
She writes a field note that is meant to be kept and remembered. She says, access cannot be measured by whether someone survived the room.
Wow.
Let me say that again, because it changes everything. Access cannot be measured by whether someone survived the room.
That is incredibly powerful. It shifts the burden of proof off the individual and puts it firmly back onto the environment.
It does.
You shouldn't have to collapse in public to prove that the lights are too bright. You shouldn't have to lose your ability to speak to prove that the room is too loud.
We have to start believing people before passing becomes necessary. Imagine a world where putting in earplugs before the noise takes away your language is seen as standard self-care.
Instead of being treated as evidence in a trial about whether you were being reasonable.
Exactly. Imagine leaving a room before the blankness sets in and having that exit respected rather than questioned or penalized.
It is about trusting the internal reality of the person rather than demanding they perform for our external comfort.
Yeah.
It is about realizing that just because someone can appear calm while overloaded or, nod while processing absolutely nothing doesn't mean they aren't paying a massive delayed price.
That hidden arithmetic is just exhausting. The ultimate goal isn't to be the first autistic person to pass perfectly. The goal, as Dr. Hoerricks so beautifully puts it, is to be the first autistic person to move through public spaces and not pay for it later.
To not have the performance of fine become a crippling debt the body inevitably collects in the dark.
Precisely.
Passing isn't a magic trick where autism just disappears for the convenience of the people around them. It is brutal, delayed arithmetic.
It's a high-stakes negotiation where the body always keeps better records than the institution. The visible moment is never the whole event.
And until we recognize that, until we look past the illusion of the calm screen, we will continue to mistake the suppression of a struggle for the absence of a struggle.
We will keep viewing someone's silent endurance as validation of our own environments.
Think about your own life. Think about your own workplaces, your classrooms, your friend groups, and your families.
Yeah.
If our standard for belonging in those spaces requires parts of us or parts of the people we care about to completely disappear just to make others comfortable, are we actually building communities?
Or are we just building beautifully decorated waiting rooms for eventual burnout?
What hidden arithmetic is happening right next to you? And honestly, what invoices are you secretly paying just to be marked as present in your own life?
That's the real question.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, for exploring this profound paradigm shift together, and for being willing to look beneath the surface. We'll catch you next time.